Why don't Perfect. Why don't we get started? And I think, do we need to do the first little bit of introductions about we're on Zoom and all of the reminders about that? Is that the place we start? And I don't know is Kimberly doing that for us or Heidi?
I think Heidi's gonna do it.
I get the privilege. Good morning,
Perfect.
or I guess afternoon, everyone. Welcome to committee members, liaisons, and members of the public to the Legal Service Trust Fund Commission Eligibility and Budget Review Committee meeting. Thank you for joining us, and we will begin at 12:02. We are using Zoom with a goal to foster a more inclusive environment and effective meeting. If you would like to comment during the meeting, please use the raised hand feature. To use the raised hand feature by phone, dial *9 on your phone's dial pad to raise your hand, and the same to lower your hand. Please utilize this tool to virtually indicate that you would like to speak in order to help the chair facilitate the discussion. All Legal Service Trust Fund Commission and committee meetings will be recorded and posted on the State Bar website. A friendly reminder that this is a video conference and to please be aware of your surroundings behind you. Zoom captioning is available. To enable, select live transcript at the bottom of your Zoom screen and then select enable auto transcription. Some troubleshooting tips for those using Zoom on a computer. When on mute, hold down the space bar will temporarily unmute you. If you use your phone to dial into the meeting, please be sure your computer's microphone is on mute to avoid audio feedback issues. While joining audio via computer is highly recommended, if an individual loses audio, they can call in separately using the Zoom's conference number.
Thank you very much, Heidi. Well done. So I think we're ready for roll call.
Great. Blakemore,
Here.
Cloggy, Fightmaster,
Here.
King,
Here.
Klein,
Here.
Meeker,
Here.
Vargas.
Here.
Great. And our advisor, Judge Seligman.
Here.
I'll go through liaisons and State Bar stuff. Selena Copeland.
Present.
Laura Brown. Melanie Snyder. Dwan Wing. Yeah. Heidi Slater.
Here.
Brady Dewar. Thank you.
Terrific. Thank you. It looks like we are going to do public comment before other action items. Is that right, Erica?
It's at your discretion. So
okay, let's do just a general public comment period now. And if there are some grantees who want to make a longer statement, I think would be a better opportunity to do something longer when that item comes up on the agenda. And we can perhaps be flexible about when we take up that item, depending on people's availability. So is there any public comment? And if you could limit these comments to 3 minutes per speaker, that would be terrific. Thank you.
Erica, there are two members of the public with their hands raised. You want me to let the first one speak?
yes.
Okay.
So it looks like we have Christian Abasto.
Hello, Commission members. This is Christian Abasto. I am the Legal Director at Disability Rights California. And I just wanted to comment a little bit about the carryover requests. Last year, Disability Rights California was one of the organizations that was requesting a huge carryover request. And we appreciate the flexibility that the Commission gave us. And there was a lot of discussion sort of how we got here and what we needed to do. So this year, because of the flexibility, we were actually not on the list. We don't have a carryover request. We were able to adjust, make some changes, do promotions, do some salary adjustments, hire, etc. So I'm here today to urge the Commission to give our sister agencies today that are making similar requests this year similar flexibility. It's still difficult to hire attorneys. The market is still tough. Disability Rights California is competing with a state and counties that offer higher salaries to attorneys and have pensions. So even though we're not on the list this year, I'm here to testify that it's still a tough market out there. It still takes a long time to hire. It's tough to compete with state jobs and county jobs, especially because they provide pensions. But we are hopeful, though, that the new rules that I think the Trust Fund Commission, the State Bar are looking, that will clarify sort of how carryovers will be handled in the future, will provide some clarity. So again, I'm here to urge, to support and urge the same leniency that the Commission gave Disability Rights California last year, and that it provide that flexibility for our sister agencies today. Thank you.
Thanks, Christian. Is there a second comment, Kimberly?
Yes, two more. I'll let the second person talk.
Oops. Hi, welcome, Stephanie.
Hi, my name's Stephanie Valencia. I am the CFO for California Rural Legal Assistance, Inc., and I will just follow up with what Christian shared. We also requested a carryover for our 2021 awards. Thankfully, we were also able to not be in that position again in 2022. And I wanted to share, I'm newer to legal aid, newer to the organization, so I wasn't around at that time, but just some of my perspective on some of the struggles that we've had with the carryovers, and really we've tried to be strategic on our spend down, and we did give significant pay increases to our staff in 2022, but we really had to balance that with not overextending our organization. We did the pay increases based on salary survey data, and we had concerns about overdoing the salary increases, as CRLA does not have significant reserves to fall back on if funding was cut in future years. And so that was a major consideration for us in the pay increases. And then another area where our organization has struggled, and I'm not sure how common this is, but is spending in the correct counties. And we are statewide, so we have funding in various counties throughout the state, and the reporting is really quite complicated to get it all done. And so that's another issue that we've struggled with. I think we have a solution going forward into 2023, but some of these organizations that are requesting carryovers may have also struggled with the reporting requirements, and just the inability to pivot, and is really where I think we've struggled, like overspending in one county and not spending enough in another. And I'd be happy to discuss that issue with any staff that are interested in hearing more about the challenges that we've had in that area. And that is all that I have. So I just wanted to support those that are needing carryovers and give the committee some background on some of the struggles that legal aid organizations are facing.
Thanks for that, Stephanie. We appreciate you joining. Was there a third presenter, Kimberly?
Actually, it's three more. I'll let the next one talk.
Okay. It looks like, is it Leigh that has joined us? Leigh Farron?
Lee, yes, thank you.
Uh-huh.
Let me lower my hands. Okay, good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity. My name is Leigh Farron. I'm a program director at One Justice. We work closely with nonprofit leaders on organizational management and strategy across California. Today, I'm sharing information with sharing information based on conversations with legal services organizations across the state, as well as the expertise of our staff. As I think everyone is aware, there's never a shortage of work to be done at legal services organizations, and there's always a need to expand the services available to the community. IOLTA and EAF serve as very important baseline funding for legal services organizations. The programs fill in gaps in funding for specific projects and reassure staff that their jobs won't end when program-specific funding ends. It increases the likelihood of retention of experienced staff and increasing morale. The funds are being used. But programs need flexibility with the funds, as the two prior speakers articulated. The variability of IOLTA grants can make budgeting at nonprofit organizations challenging. Nonprofit leaders are maximizing the effectiveness of the funding by looking at least a few years down the road to keep funding stable. In years when IOLTA grants are larger, allowing organizations to carry over funds to a year when there is an expected dip or when short-term funding for particular programs may be sunsetting will ensure program stability. Organizations will have stable staffing, program capacity, and overall program development, meaning organizations can focus on expanding their work and developing their staff rather than constantly adjusting to shifts in funding. Overall, ensuring that low-income Californians have reliable access to high-quality legal services. Carryovers allow legal services organizations to maintain a consistent budget without dipping into reserves, so they are better able to serve the communities who so desperately need them. Thank you so much.
Thanks for joining.
So there's one more.
Okay, just one other one?
It's this person, and then there's one more person after
Okay,
this.
great, thank you. Is it Arti?
Yeah, this is Arti Kohli. I'm the Executive Director of Advancing Justice Asian Law Caucus. We do have a carryover request, and I just wanted to note that I'm here and I can reserve my comments for when it's appropriate, but I just wanted to let you know that I was here.
Oh, that's terrific. And are you able to stay for the length of the meeting?
I do. I can come back as needed. I have a call with my board chair in about 45 minutes, but I will, Selena has said that she will let me know. I can come back.
Okay, so let us finish the public comment and we'll see how we can adjust the agenda or invite you to come back. And I'm sure we'll appreciate hearing from you when that item's up for discussion. So thank you.
Thank you.
Kimberly?
Yeah,
Looks like Diego Cartagena is with us.
yeah.
Hi, good afternoon, and thank you so much for this opportunity. As was mentioned, my name is Diego Cartagena, and I serve as President and CEO of Betsedic Legal Services. And I sincerely appreciate the opportunity to reinforce the concepts that my colleagues have already touched upon regarding the importance of flexibility in the use of IOLTA and EAF funds. This is really a critical concept. The fact that the funds can be used to cover a wide range of positions, engaging a diverse set of substantive issues from the perspective of the agencies, and most importantly, from the perspective of the communities in need, is critical, one of the critical strengths of this funding. It means that agencies are able to rapidly, efficiently, and effectively respond to urgent and/or emerging needs. In contrast, it's very rare for private foundations and the grants they provide their grantees the ability to respond and adjust in this way. Nevertheless, there are instances in which unexpected funding can be found to support a particular need that was initially funded largely using state bar dollars. When that happens, it's important that agencies have the flexibility to divert the dollars to meet other emerging needs, including having the opportunity to carry over funds. This is a good, and I would argue, in fact, great thing. It means that an agency has found dedicated funding and can support the work using those dollars. But the shift in funding obviously means shifting allocations and funding streams with an agency, which can take a great deal of time and energy. And this can result in periods of time when the drawdowns in state bar funds by agencies will be impacted. Once those shifts are made, however, it means we are accomplishing two things that I believe make a great deal of sense to everyone, including the Commission. First, we're making the best use of dollars available. And secondly, and again, most importantly, we're meeting the community need. And I think we have seen examples of this happening not only during the height of the pandemic, but even today when agencies are being approached with unexpected funding from outside sources, whether that be funding related to housing from county and city governments, as we're seeing here in Los Angeles, the result of bond measures or other measures being passed, or unanticipated funding that comes from other sources that allow us to completely shift where and how we do work. So we greatly appreciate the commission considering these opportunities and strongly urge that it continue to retain that flexibility.
Thank you, Diego. Thanks for joining. We appreciate your comments.
Catherine, one more person raised their hand. You want me to?
Sure, of course.
Okay.
Welcome, Tim Denari.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tim Denari. I'm the Director of Finance for Greater Bakersfield Legal Assistance. And just two very brief comments. One is I wanted to let you know that I will be on the call until the end, as will my grant administrator, Danita Melton. These hearings are very important to us, of course, and we want to make sure that if there's any questions on what we presented in writing, that we're there to explain further or answer anything that you guys.
Thank you, Tim. I'm going to make a suggestion. So there's just 2 grantees with carry forward requests that have to be reviewed and approved by this committee, who will make a recommendation to the Trust Fund Commission, which is the Asian Law Caucus and the Greater Bakersfield Legal Aid. And since both of them are here now, and rather than have to go kind of back and forth and get people back on the call, my suggestion is that after we approve the minutes, that we take up item 6.2, and that way we can have the staff presentation and ask any questions we might have of the grantee before making a decision. Does that work for everyone? Okay, let's proceed in that way, but let's first do the approval of the minutes. And I think there was one correction, Erica, you noted that you had.
Yes, I just wanted to note that unfortunately, after we posted the draft, we noticed there was a typo in one of the motions. So for item 6.2 from the last meeting, we wanted to note that we did have to make a revision saying that approval of the budget proposals would be contingent upon completion of any staff requested corrections. Apologies that didn't make its way into the original draft, but we would recommend approval of the minutes as revised with this change.
Thanks for pointing that out. And does anyone else have any comments on the minutes? And if not, is there a motion to approve them as amended?
I'll also move. Well, go ahead. I'll second it.
Was that Jim making the motions?
Yes.
Thank you. And Angie, thank you for a second. Is there any other discussion about the minutes? Okay, I'm not seeing any. I think we're ready for a vote.
Great. Fight Master?
Yes.
King?
Here. Yes, sorry.
Klein?
Yes.
Meeker?
Yes.
Vargas?
Yes.
And Blakemore?
Yes.
Great. Motion.
We are approved of the minutes. All right, let's take up, as we agreed, item 6.2, which is the discussion on action on the 2020 budget revisions and carry forward requests in excess of 25%. And I think Erica will be leading us through a staff presentation about that.
Okay. As you all know, we've received a number of budget revisions and carryover requests regarding the 2022 IOLTA EAF awards. The general requirements around those requests are that any requests between 10 and 25% of the grant award can be approved at the staff level by the Director of the Office of Access and Inclusion, Anything above 25% needs to come to this committee first, and then would ultimately require commission approval. So we received a number of requests from a variety of organizations. So first, I can go through the budget revisions. We had 4 organizations that had budget revisions that would require commission approval. Those organizations are Greater Bakersfield Legal Assistance, Los Angeles Center for Law and Justice, Senior Advocacy Network, and Senior Citizens Legal Services. For Greater Bakersfield, we had noted in the memo that we had asked for a little bit more information, and which Greater Bakersfield provided to us. So regarding their budget revision, they had to reallocate paralegal and associated benefits due to some staffing changes or the inability to fill those positions. Those reallocations went to supplement lawyers, office supplies, and an increase to the salary scales that this organization uses to help with their competitiveness with their recruitment efforts. And then with EAF, their budget revision, that's almost 29%. That again had to do with reallocating from paralegal lines and other staff, as well as administrative personnel. They had difficulty hiring a category called housing navigators. This was to help in more rural areas, but they were having difficulty filling those roles. And so they had to reallocate the work that would have been done by the housing navigators to attorneys. And then they're redirecting the funds to their fair housing project. So that project started in December 2022 and will be ongoing throughout 2023. And so it's also going to cover some of their Shriver project funding. So the organization had to essentially move funds to carry to cover certain projects that otherwise are not covered by other funding at the moment. I know that Tim is on the line from Greater Bakersfield, and I think he could speak more to the budget revision if necessary. But just to quickly go through the other 3, Los Angeles Center for Law and Justice, they had some unexpected stream of funding come in, and so they revised their budget to allow a little bit more, both for IOLTA and EAF, to allow more of their expenses on the administrative side to be covered by these grants. And they also were seeing improvement in tracking their staff time in order to have a better actual estimate of time devoted to the grants. And so that was another reason why they felt they could devote some additional funding to administrative expenses than they had before. So that prompted their budget revision. Senior Advocacy Network similarly had an unexpected grant come through that they did not have at the time that they prepared their budget for 2022. So when that funding came in, they redistributed. They have an allocation methodology for accounting for their expenses. And so they redistributed some of those expenses on their line items. And then Senior Citizens Legal Services, they had some staffing challenges that required them to have their attorney staff do some work that otherwise would have been performed by paralegal staff. And so that's what precipitated their budget revision request. Catherine, I don't know if you want to allow Tim to speak, or if anybody has questions for Greater Bakersfield before moving on to carryovers.
So why don't we just see if anybody has any questions about the budget revisions? I don't know that this is an area where people will have any. So are there any questions about just the budget revision portion?
No one has their hands raised.
So did you want us to take up the budget revisions separate from the carry forwards, Erica? What makes the most sense for you?
That would be fine. I think, I had broken it out into separate motions anyway to make it a little bit easier. So if you'd like to do it that way.
Why don't we just do that? Because I think that will get us through a part of it.
So the recommended motion would be that first paragraph here.
So this is the recommendation that we approve the budget revision requests that are in excess of 25% of the grant award. That's the information that Erica just finished reviewing, which is different than additional carry forward requests. So is there a discussion or questions about that?
No hands raised.
Thank you. And would someone like to make a motion regarding that first item?
I'll move.
Thank you, Jim. Is there a second?
Second.
And the second was that you, Judge Klein?
Yes.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Okay, any further discussion? All in favor of the resolution to recommend approval of all 2022 IOLTA EAF budget revisions in excess of the 25% of the grant award is reflected in attachment B to the Legal Services Trust Fund Commission. Want to do the roll call?
Yes. Aklogi? Fightmaster?
Yes.
King?
Yes.
Klein?
Yes.
Meeker?
Yes.
Vargas?
Yes.
Blakemore?
Yes,
The motion passes.
thank you.
Okay. So then next we have the carryover requests above 25% of the grant award. As noted in the memo, there were 4 EAF carryover requests that exceeded 25%. And then just to give a little bit of background and context on these requests, the EAF funding for 2022 was higher than it's ever been. I believe it either doubled or almost tripled from the year before. And so in light of that large increase to funding in that year, the commission had decided at the outset of 2022 to allow organizations to budget those funds over 2 years instead of the traditional 1-year budget. So when we did the budgeting process for 2022, about 1/3 of grantees chose a 2-year budget. So the remaining 2/3 did not, but you know, they still had very large funding amounts compared to what they had in prior years. And so when these requests came in, staff's perspective on these carryover requests is that even very large requests should be approved, given that a number of grantees are going to have the entire year to spend down if they had 2-year budgets already. So in terms of being equitable towards these organizations and allowing them the same opportunity as organizations that had budgeted for 2 years from the start, staff is recommending approval of these requests, and that the spend down be for a period of 12 months instead of 6 months. Most carryover periods historically have been 6 months, but again, given the size of these awards and out of fairness and consideration for these organizations, staff is recommending the 12-month spend down, which the commission actually approved a 12-month spend down period for these back in December. So just sort of reminding the committee of that motion to be consistent. So, so again, these 4 organizations had, 3 of them had very large carryover requests, but we are recommending approval. And that, Jim, yes.
Yeah, Eric, we give about 100 EAF grants a year. So
Yes.
this is about 4%. Is this on the I'm just interested in historical comparisons. Are the number of carryovers increasing, decreasing, or about the same?
I think they've decreased since 2020. So 2020 was another year where there was a large amount of funding, but due to the start of the pandemic, a lot of offices closed or had challenges providing services. And so I think 2020 was sort of the high watermark in terms of the carryover requests that we've seen. But I think it's been decreasing since that time. So like 2020 was a very large amount. Last year we had a moderate amount of requests, and I would say that this is relatively small in terms of large carryovers anyway. We had other carryover requests, as you may have seen in the attachment for, what was staff approved. And then, as I said, there's up to about 33 organizations that are not included for consideration at all because they had 2-year budgets. So I assume most of those organizations have some amount of unspent funds, but they're not kind of considered carryovers in this context because they were allowed to budget for those 2 years already. So had we not done that, had that not been an option that the commission chose to pursue, then I think you probably would be seeing a lot more carryovers under the EAF category anyway this year.
Thanks.
Yes, Catherine?
So my question, and it might be something I don't know. I know Tim is here for Greater Bakersfield Legal Assistance. I don't know about the other programs with a large request. I absolutely support the staff recommendation about equity so that everyone's treated the same. I think my only observation is 71% of a grant to spend by December is going to be combined with another year of funding. And while the equal access funding will be somewhat less, I just worry a bit that we will have the same organizations making a similar large carry forward request in the subsequent year because you're sort of rolling the money forward. And I'm interested in knowing if any of these the three organizations with the large funding request have thought about essentially how to spend 2 years of a grant within the same period of time. So I don't know whether Tim is still with us and has a comment or whether staff has any information in its discussions with programs about that.
I'm gonna allow Tim to speak again.
Sure, thank you. Welcome, Tim.
Hi there. Can you hear me?
Sure can, thank you.
I have a little bit of a cold, so sorry about my voice here. It's a good question, and it's one that we, of course, wrestle with from year to year as we have large carryovers, and then there's an onslaught of new money, of course, that comes in. This year is a little bit unique in that we have a very prescribed use for the carryover. We have a couple of projects that we're in the refunding stage, but we don't have funding as we sit here right now, which is our fair housing project and our Shriver project, which will end its funding on September 30th. So we're using the EAF carryover money and a little bit of the EAF current year money to fund our fair housing attorneys and our Shriver attorneys, as Erica was mentioning, so that we don't have to do layoffs and we can continue those programs. Hopefully we'll get refunded and then all will be well going forward into 2024. Additionally, the current year EAF program then will be used for the core EAF stuff that we normally do, the rural activity and things like that. So we think between all those things melding together, we're going to have an opportunity, and trust me, we want it to be this way, where we get our carryover down to a very reasonable amount. That is, in the past, historically, prior to COVID, we've been at the, 10% range and just a kind of a no-brainer, just a small lap over from year to year. And that's our goal to try to get there this year. The other thing I wanted to mention is that as a systemic issue on trying to hire people and keep them hired on the core EAF program, our board is very keen on this problem. And as of the fourth quarter of last year, we revised our salary scales. We did a COLA type increase for both retention and in order to be competitive and continue to recruit these positions. So we're keeping our board very active in it. Obviously, several of our board members are attorneys and they're feeling the pain too. Some of them work for the public agencies such as the Public Defender's Office and are having some of the same challenges that we are. So in that light, they've been very supportive of us trying to maintain a competitive landscape as it relates to salary and benefits. So we feel good about going into 23 from a recruitment standpoint.
Thank you for all the information. Did any commission member have any other question for Tim? Okay, thank you. And Heidi, it looks like you had your hand up.
I have worked both with California Women's Law Center and Inland Empire Latino Lawyers Association, so I can sort of speak to what's happened for them a little bit. Inland Empire specifically, their EAF problem stems from writing their EAF grant for a very specific project that has no longer been needed in their area, and they were under the impression, for reasons I'm not sure of, that they couldn't change that. And so it only came out during our monitoring visit that if that they could request a modification to their project if their project was no longer viable. And so they have done that through their budget request as well. And so once they're able to fund more viable projects in their neighborhood or their community rather, they believe that they should be able to expend those funds. So I think some of this is they would have been expending it prior to that if they had understood they could have modified the program objectives for that. The California Women Law Center, my understanding is their EAF carryover really stems a lot from staffing issues and being able to hire and retain staffing. Whether or not I can't speak to as much their ability to spend it down simultaneously in 2023 with their 2023 grant, but I do know that the problem really stems from staffing problems and challenges.
Do you know whether they have a plan to address sort of in the way, like Tim described, sort of a very specific plan that Greater Bakersfield implemented to address kind of recruitment and retention challenges? Do you have a similar sense from the California Women's Law Center?
I can't say with certainty about that. I don't know that that was not the level of our conversation. I've had more of the conversation with Inland Empire as, I help them to strategize, sort of their way forward out of this, the situation they're in. So I can't really speak to what steps California Women's Law Center has taken. Other than just to say, I know what the issues they identified during the monitoring visit were, but Inland Empire, we talked more about strategies moving forward because, that was a concern at their level.
Okay, thanks. Go ahead, Eric.
As far as California Women's Law Center, I think, just based on the submission with their request, they had mentioned, as Heidi said, some hiring challenges, but that they do have a plan for hiring additional staff this year in order to help bring down some of those percentages regarding their carryover, and that they've had success already with hiring at least one new housing attorney towards the end of 2022. So at least they do have somebody that can be working on the grant in order to be spending down the 2022 funds. I mean, I don't know. Obviously, I think it remains to be seen in terms of if they still have open positions that they need to fill, but it sounds like they're intent on, getting those positions filled and are aware of that being sort of the primary challenge. I also wanted to note, I think Sylvia from Inland Empire had her hand raised.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I can't see that. So
no problem.
Great. So Sylvia, welcome.
Oh, okay. Hi.
Welcome. Did you have a comment you wanted to make to us?
Yes, I did. I first of all, I want to thank Heidi for speaking on behalf of Inland Empire Latino Lawyers, and then let you know that I am here and I could hear you. And just to reiterate on kind of what we talked with Heidi, is that as we had mentioned to Heidi, we were focused in the past on two programs, and it was one program which was for teen parents, and so there was a huge decline of clients with that program. So we've kind of changed it to be able to spend more of the money. And our focus now on a greater community, that the Latino community, the Spanish-speaking community, that we are, these are the clients that we are getting more and more of at our organization because of the area that we service. But those are our ideas to change to change the program so that we do not have these high carryovers.
Great. Thank you for the comment and the input, and we appreciate you joining us.
Yes, sorry that it wasn't showing that I was here, but thank you for the opportunity also to hear us out. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Are there any other questions of staff or grantees that are here about the EAF carry forwards? And Erica, are we doing this all as one motion, and should we therefore just go on to the IOLTA ones, or were they separate? I'm sorry, I'm not recalling that slide.
No problem. I had separated them out because of the different carryover periods. So
let's look at the motion for the EAF carry forwards.
So it would be the middle paragraph.
So it's resolved that the Eligibility Budget Review Committee recommends approval of all 2022 EAF carryforward requests in excess of 25% of the grant award, as reflected in Attachment B to the Legal Services Trust Fund Commission, along with the requirement that the funds not spent by December 31st, 2023 be returned to the State Bar. And I think that date reflects the additional year that other grantees have received that did the 2-year budget. So are there any questions about that motion? And if not, would someone be willing to make a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Thank you, Louise. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Angie. Is there any other discussion?
I got a question. Are we doing both motions?
No, we're just doing the middle one right now. We did the top one a bit ago, and we're doing the next one, and then we'll go on to the 2 IOLTA request. Make sense?
Thanks.
You're welcome. Okay, let's do a roll call.
Akagi?
Erica,
Oh, yes.
you get a second? I don't remember hearing one.
Yes, Angie, I
Okay.
believe seconded. Yeah. Great. Akagi? Fightmaster?
Yes,
King?
yes, abstain as to the slow laugh.
Thank you. Klein?
Yes.
Meeker?
Yes.
Vargas?
Yes.
Blakemore?
Yes,
Motion passes.
thank you so much. All right, the last part of item 6.2 are the IOLTA carry forwards, and there's 2 that we need to consider about that. I think the representative from Asian Law Caucus, RT, is only available till 1, so I thought we could maybe take that up, ask her any questions so that we can just let her get onto the other call that she had.
Sure. RT should be able to unmute yourself now.
Yes, I am here.
Thank you. Did you want to provide any just staff background information before we ask questions?
Yeah, I did have about a 5-minute statement. I mean, is that okay for me to
Sure.
Okay. Thank you. As you know, I'm Arti Kohli. I'm the Executive Director of Advancing Justice Asian Law Caucus. I do want to thank you all, the commissioners and the staff. And I know that you have a heavy responsibility and mandate to ensure that funds are used appropriately and to serve low-income communities. And we share that goal. So I want to assure you that we have a plan to spend down the funds by the deadline. I know 47% is a high carryover, and we do understand that if we do not spend it down, we will need to return the unspent funds. I can share with you what caused the underspending. Our underspending was caused by 3 unfilled positions, a litigation fellow and 2 community advocates, which is a position cross between a paralegal and legal assistant. We have since that point, we have now hired a litigation fellow, a paralegal, and a community advocate. And I also want to assure you, I think that at times there may be a suspicion that people are holding IOLTA dollars as reserves. We are not doing that. We are very fortunate, knock on wood, to have 6 months of board designated reserves. And for us, this is really just about having a real challenge in hiring. And with regard to that, I would like to share some of what we're grappling with at the Asian Law Caucus. And while I won't speak for my colleagues, I would also like to share what I'm observing in the legal services sector. And so just want to give you some context, some of our broader current challenges, and also share with you what we are, steps that we are undertaking to address these challenges. So as I mentioned, there's a staffing challenge in the nonprofit sector, and I have been really doing a lot of research and reflection as to why we keep coming up with, why we're hitting this challenge. And one thing in particular, although it's not specific to this grant, but just in general, we are having a really hard time hiring people with over 10 years of experience and managing attorneys, people to train these junior staff who we are bringing on board. And what has come to light is that the economic downturn in 2007 and 2008, the Great Recession, impacted our sector significantly, meaning that many of our organizations had hiring freezes, and it took almost a decade for the sector to recover. And so those people that we would have hired if we had had the resources back then would now be senior attorneys and managers who could in turn train our new attorneys. And so we effectively closed a pipeline. Also, as California Supreme Court Justice Goodwin Liu and his co-authors have noted in a UC Davis Law Review article in 2020, total enrollment declined at 25% in law schools since the Great Recession. Notably, Asian Americans have the largest decline in enrollment in law school of any ethnic group. So at Asian Law Caucus, we are an equal opportunity employer. We welcome applicants of all backgrounds. That said, Asian American attorneys are often the ones most interested in working at our organization. And as a result of what's happening, we have a smaller pool of attorneys interested in working with us. In addition, hiring is particularly challenging for organizations that need to provide services to monolingual clients, and we are also aiming to have folks with cultural competency. This further narrows the pool of qualified applicants. So at the same time, we have fewer qualified folks, we have had a rapid growth in our population. Asian Americans are almost 17% of the population in California, and unfortunately, there are large numbers of folks living below the poverty line. And so as a result, our organization is being asked to do a lot more than we have historically been doing. So we have gone, I've been executive director for 6 years and have been at the organization 8 years. In my time as executive director, we have gone from a staff of 27 6 years ago to 68 staff positions on our current budget. I would not wish this growth on anyone, but it's, and it creates a lot of challenges in terms of management, infrastructure, and hiring. So I'm not going to belabor the point that I'm sure you've heard from many others, but our analysis is that the pandemic has also contributed to turnover. It's caused people to reevaluate their career choices, particularly high deliverable, jobs, attorney jobs, and a significant portion of our turnover has been because people are seeking work to, they want to work fewer hours. They are actually taking a break from working altogether, or pivoting to jobs that are less demanding. So let me pivot, let me turn to what we are doing to address this. So we've increased salaries and are at or close to 75th percentile for compensation for nonprofit employers in our band of organizations with budgets over 10 million. In terms of taking into account staff burnout and feedback, we are also evaluating high deliverable city government funding in certain program areas. And we have actually are considering, not renewing some of those grants that are clearly burning out our staff. So we've also had wellness days, floating holidays, all kinds of things to, help it make our environment more working environment more sustainable. We have a union and working closely with our labor management committee to address any workplace issues. We've added 2 new full-time supervisory roles to support the new junior staff we are hiring, including legal assistants and paralegals. We're providing coaching support for our managers and directors, and we have a sabbatical policy after 5 years. So just want to, share with you that while this is, a specific request related to, challenges in staffing, it is to our benefit to address this for our organization as a whole. And we are seeking partners in you all and other folks who are funding civil rights and legal services, because this is a sectoral challenge. I've talked to many other EDs who are facing it. And, I think really appreciate your staff and your support as we work to address this challenge. Thank you.
Thanks for your comments. Are there members of the commission that have questions to ask? Okay, while others of you are thinking, if you have a question, I guess one of my questions, Artie, is, so I really appreciate hearing everything you've been doing to address the staffing challenges. And I think, as we know, there's going to be an increase in IOLTA funding for the year that is beginning now. And
yeah.
I think I'm interested in sort of hearing from you. So you have sort of half a year of carry forward money, plus you have an IOLTA grant that is larger and is kind of happening in the same period of time. And what plans do you have to be able to sort of manage and spend what really becomes a much larger amount of money than you typically would have in 1 year?
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is the conversation we're having with our program managers, our finance director, and our development director. I think we need to right size, and this is why we're considering stepping out of some of our local grants. And we are also looking to see how much can we realistically expand our staffing. Like I mentioned, the problem for me, I would happily hire a few more attorneys. It's just, it takes us months and months to find people who are like the right fit for us, and who are, to get a pool of people to apply to our organization. So we're getting better at that piece. I think our salaries are competitive. We're putting the word out that we are, equal opportunity employer. You don't have to be API to work with us. All of those things. So can I promise that we will not have another carryover request? I think I would be, I'm not quite sure, what to say to that. Do I want to work very hard not to have one? Absolutely, because this is not fun for anybody. And so we're in that process of planning and evaluating with my team. The challenge is what it is. And to the extent that we can avoid that, I would very much like to. I just, being a lawyer, I am also risk averse. I just don't know what I can promise.
Yeah, I don't think people here are asking that you promise. I think it's hearing about the plans that you have, and I would just encourage you to stay in touch with the staff about the plans that you have so that maybe they can provide technical assistance and have other ideas about ways in which funds can be spent so that you're not carrying over a significant amount of the current year grant next year. So I don't think
Absolutely.
we're asking for a promise, but thank you so much.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And we had a call yesterday with Erica, and we actually, offered the same, which was to say, we would like to be in more consistent contact with you so that you're aware of how we're, planning on addressing these issues.
That's terrific.
Yeah.
Glad to hear that. Okay, other commission members, any comments? And Erica, I didn't know whether you had anything to add as a staff about this request.
No,
And
I think.
Oh, sorry. No, do you want
Go ahead.
to, Erica? Sorry.
No problem.
It's more of a question because I don't know the information that what happens if, and I'm not saying we should, but the committee were to recommend not approving the carryover, does the money come back into the fund and get reimbursed this year for, like current things get a boost, or, and how bad? Well, that's one part of it. The other, which I figured would happen, but the other part is if the agency voluntarily chooses to relinquish some of that money back because it, as you say, it's difficult to spend 2 years in 1 year. What happens in the future to their prospects of getting that money back again?
Yeah, thank you for asking that question. So to your first question, if for some reason a carryover request were not approved, any amount of money that is remitted to the state bar does get redistributed in future grant administration years. It wouldn't be this year because allocations have already been determined and the formula has already been run. So most likely it would go into the amount of money that's available for distribution in 2024. So in the coming year. Funding that comes back to the state bar is tied to the county in which it was allocated. And so it would go back out in the county where it was originally dedicated. So to your second question, the organization wouldn't be impacted in any way in terms of its ability to receive future funding. If the organization remains eligible and, reports its qualified expenditures, it goes into the funding formula as any other organization. And it is possible actually that some of the funding they've returned may actually come back to them in the form of a future grant, but also some of it would be redistributed to other organizations in the county in which, or counties in which they operate.
Thank you. Thank you.
Sure.
Did you have other comments you wanted to make, Erica?
I just wanted to say, I think RT covered all of the specifics in terms of what their plans are in terms of the carryover and what the challenges they faced that resulted in the need for the carryover request. So I don't think I have anything to add to that. Just that after speaking with them yesterday, I think I know staff had deferred on a recommendation, but that we would recommend approval of this carryover request in light of the explanation that they have provided.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments or questions from commission members about Advancing Justice Asian Law Caucus? Go on.
I just have a question, and maybe my memory's fuzzy, but last year when the commission approved the large carryovers, I want to recall that there was a motion that was quite lengthy that went along with that to give those programs some guidance or heads up that what would be like happening if they also had a large carryover request. I don't know if this committee wants to think about providing that heads up again or not, but I think that's what I recalled happened.
And can you refresh your memory about what that motion was, or is there somebody that could look it up for us?
Erica probably knows, but I thought it was like if you're I'm paraphrasing now, pretty much if you're requesting another large carryover, it will unlikely to be approved, is the gist of it that I remember, but I could be wrong. Erica probably remembers.
Yeah. I can look up the specific language, but essentially the motion was that, the flexibility that we were talking about before that was afforded to grantees in 2020 and 2021, given the pandemic and all of the operational challenges folks were facing, that the commission had been sort of as flexible as possible and had broadly approved these requests. The motion was that, going forward, that the commission didn't believe that the conditions for those extraordinary circumstances were met broadly, but that an organization could obviously demonstrate in their situation that there were extraordinary circumstances. So it was essentially a warning that the commission just wouldn't be sort of giving blanket approval to these requests and would be looking at them more closely. So I have it up now if you would like me to read the actual motion.
Sure. Look at you multitask while you're talking and researching.
So the motion, which was passed at the end of 2021, so after reviewing 2021 carryovers, was that resolved, given extraordinary circumstances in 2020 and 2021, the Legal Services Trust Fund Commission has exercised its discretion to permit a flexible approach to carryover requests. In light of that exercise of discretion, the Commission approves the remaining budget revisions and carryover requests above 25% of the 2021 IOLTA and EAF grant awards. The Commission does not anticipate such extraordinary circumstances going forward, and therefore will no longer apply that flexible approach when considering future requests. So in the motion itself, there was no limit, but staff had noted that during discussion, there had been discussion about 50% seeming like when you're entering the territory of, exceedingly large requests. But again, I was also made clear that the commission would be looking at these on a case-by-case basis.
So Eric, before I just go to the other two hands, so there were a group of programs whose requests were being approved with that motion. Was the Asian Law Caucus one of the organizations on that list, or this is sort of them making a request just this year?
Excuse me, they were not on the list in terms of, they did have carryovers the past 2 years. But last year it was 23%, which was staff approved. It was at the staff approved level. And in 2020, it was 32%. But again, citing those very extraordinary circumstances, the commission sort of approved every request, I think, that came through. So they have had carryover requests the past 2 years, but it was not in the category of the ones that the commission was most concerned about that were, 50, 60, 70%.
All right. And then just so we all have all the information, I believe this was an organization that had a significant amount of homeless prevention funds that were unspent. And there was action taken at the last commission meeting relative to that, where some money was coming back, but they were provided with the opportunity to have the last quarter of spending. Do I have that correct?
Yes, I'm sorry, I don't remember the exact motion, but that is correct, that homelessness prevention funds were discussed regarding this organization at a prior commission meeting due to failure to spend the funds. And
yeah, I was on a plane during the last commission meeting, and I was not available to talk to you about it. But basically, we have had 2 cycles of staffing turnover in our housing program, and we were actually, have put a pause on our housing work to evaluate what we need to do to make it a sustainable program. Like every single staff person who has gone through that's worked on that program at ALC has told us that the high deliverable, way that the program is set up is burning them out. And so you know, that particular program has, unlike our other legal programs, we do a lot of immigration and employment work, requires special attention. And so we are giving it that attention in terms of figuring out. So we have walked away from the tenant's right to counsel, which is a high deliverable grants from the city of San Francisco. That was actually the main challenge that we were encountering. And so, yeah, I mean, we're dealing with it, but yes, that particular program has been very difficult for us to run. Yeah.
And so at this point, are you expecting to be able to spend the homeless prevention funds, that last quarter's worth of funding?
Yes, so we did have, I mean, we are able to spend down what we have. And are providing, you know, community outreach, and, you know, we are doing some level of service. At the same time, we're pausing and actually, I mean, we're doing the work, but we're really evaluating what we're going to build moving forward. So we need to hire a senior person to run that program. And that's the piece that we, you know, we're not applying for more homeless prevention money moving forward until we have a plan for what are we going to do in terms of housing justice and eviction prevention work.
Okay, thanks for that. Okay, we have lots of commission members who have their hands up or guests, but I think Selena was first. So Selena, did you have a comment or a question? And then Javier, and then Judge Seligman.
Sure, and I'll keep mine really brief. I just wanted to make a quick comment in relation to what Angie had said a few minutes ago about a difficulty in spending 2 years of grant funding in 1 year. For both of these carryover requests, for the IOLTA carryover requests being discussed, neither of them are even past 50%. So it's not spending 2 grants in 1 year, it's spending 1 and change. But really my recollection from 2020 and 2021 were those were very, very high carryover requests. And most of those organizations were eventually able to spend it down. They just needed that flexibility that this committee did give at that time. Most of that was honestly the PPP loan and the other federal funding that was one-time funding. But those were pretty heavy carryovers, and almost all those organizations were able to spend it down, and you don't have rolling request of 50% carryover every year. There's just, you know, often a challenge each year that impacts organizations differently and different organizations differently. So just to say, you know, 47% and 35% are both high, but they're not near 100% carryovers, and we did see some very large ones.
Yeah, I think I at least was describing this as almost 50%. So it's spending 1.5 years of money, I think, in a year. Okay, Javier.
Let me lower my hand here. I think I am a new commission member, so I'm still trying to understand. I am curious if we know, maybe not the specifics of the exact data, but just general trends. How it's clear pandemic has created a lot of disruption, staffing, the actual service delivery in the constituents that different organizations are serving. Like that, it makes a ton of sense. And this seems consistent what I'm hearing even from the folks that were here last year with the carryover request. I am curious, before pandemic, what is normal? And I'll put that in quotes, right? Like what is more standard? Is this common, like to see almost 50% carryovers? That's my part A, right? What is like kind of normal? And then part B is, are we using, pandemic aside, but even before, using any of these carryover requests as learnings for how we then evaluate at the front end of granting these funds? Does that question make sense? Like, is it changing the way we're evaluating if we're seeing significant carryover requests?
So I don't know if staff has a a comment? I don't know the percentage of carryover requests before 2020. I don't think I was on the commission then, so it would require somebody with more expertise than me. So let's take up that question first.
Yeah, I'm not sure if Duan has more historical knowledge because I was new to staff I started in like 2019. So the pandemic and period afterwards is kind of my personal frame of reference. But I can say anecdotally, having looked at requests from say 2018 and 2019, my recollection is that there are fewer requests and that they tended to be lower percentages. 2020, as we've said, I would say at least 2/3 of grantees needed some sort of accommodation in terms of carryover of funds. And then it's been going down since then in terms of the number of requests that we're getting, but we are still seeing, I would say, more sustained kind of high percentages for those who are requesting it. But, as I think Selena just alluded to, it varies from year to year. It's not necessarily the same organization every time. So, Duan, I don't know if you're on or if you had anything.
I can confirm that. So I came on staff about 2014, 2015. So from that time to now, to the pandemic, we've had some every year, but they weren't large, and they were, from my recollection, one-offs. And then prior to that, our grants weren't that large. And then the 2018, the Great Recession, so programs were able to spend it pretty easily.
And then I think the second question was, is there and please correct me, Javier, if I'm misstating this, but I think it was, is there any information we learned that would tell us how we should do our granting process differently?
Yeah. So even it sounds like it's a short-term, hopefully, fingers crossed, relatively short-term impact that maybe has a long tail. If you see another batch, even if it's slightly smaller next year, it's like, are there any things that we can learn or adjust on the front end as we're evaluating to minimize carryovers? I know we're not going to fix the labor market, right? But even in the last 2 years, any tweaks that we've thought of making?
So I know that one item that's been thought about, and this is for a future commission discussion, is whether multi-year budgeting is feasible and would provide the kind of flexibility that grantees need without necessarily coming back to us with a one-year carryover request. I think we will learn something because the commission approved that for, as you know, from looking at this information, for the EAF request. And if we, in that multi-year period of time, see that people have spent their money and have not encountered significant difficulty in spending the next year grant as well, then that may provide some insight for us about what we might want to think about going forward. So I think people are interested in that discussion. I know LAC is interested in that discussion about how we can do those things in staff. So sort of more to come about that, particularly as we see the second full year of the EAF.
Thank you.
Judge Seligman, welcome.
Yeah, hi. I just want to suggest we not issue any kind of statement that we're not going to be flexible in the future. We are still in what they used to call in Cuba the special period, which is we remain in a very tight labor market. Inflation still is an issue, and it is exceedingly difficult for nonprofits and governmental entities. We're facing it at the court to hire, and we're losing people left and right. That's a reality right now, which I expect is going to be with us at least for the next year. I mean, the Federal Reserve is just indicated they're going to be doing things going into 2024. And I think during that period of time, particularly, we need to be flexible. Most of the explanations we heard for these carryovers, a lot of it has to do with labor issues and retaining and getting employees. And I know each of those programs would have much rather kept those employees and done their programs. So I think we need to be flexible on that going forward and not issue some kind of diktat that, we're not going to be, because we should be, frankly. That's all I wanted to say.
Thank you. Selena?
Very quick in response to Javier's questions earlier, I pulled up just for my own recollection, the 2018 carryover request. And the same problems back then. There were not as many organizations with carryover requests, but they ranged from about 5 to 45%. And the reasons were all related to hiring, you know, having people leave and just needing some time to replace that position, or change in staffing model. So I would say that there are more carrying over now this year than what we saw as recently as 2018, but the reasons are the same. They're individual to every organization, but very, very common. And to the point that Judge Seligman just made, LSC is taking that same response right now. They are approving all extraordinary circumstance carryover requests for all of their grantees. They still call it extraordinary circumstance above the 25th percentile request, but they have this kind of ongoing assumption that organizations can carry over. And they, like IOLTA, are in an increasing budget revenue time where LSC funding is increasing. And so organizations know that there's not a year directly in front of them with the less funding that they can then carry over and fill the gaps. It's that they are going to be more and more funding in the near future.
So are there other comments from members of the commission or questions? And if not, I think we should just briefly refresh ourselves about the Public Law Center and then figure out what action we want to take. So Erica, do you want to refresh us for the last grantee? Thank you.
Sure. So Public Law Center had a 35% proposed carryover. And in their explanation, they cited some hiring difficulties. I believe they were going to hire a DEI consultant that they hadn't had an opportunity to hire yet. They had also anticipated leasing new office space in 2022, but had to defer that to 2023. So there were some unspent funds related to that. And then they also didn't spend as much as anticipated on things like interpretation and translation, as well as litigation and technology costs, because they were having some retention and hiring challenges in order to hire the attorney staff that would be supported by those expenditures. So in their submission, they explained that they do have space that they're going to be leasing starting in 2023. So they anticipate spending down there, and that they've similarly been able to improve their staffing numbers and hire the key staff that they needed to run their projects. And so particularly the interpretation and translation funds, as well as technology and litigation, they also anticipate spending those, that they're on track to spend those down. I think it was just the DEI consultant that they're still working to hire that person, but anticipate they'll be able to engage someone within the carryover spend down period, which I may have said this before, but just to reiterate, for IOLTA, the spend down of the carryover would be through June 30th of this year, so a 6-month carryover period.
So, and I don't think we have anyone from the Public Law Center with us, not that I observed, so, okay. So are there any questions for Erica about the Public Law Center's presentation of the request? Okay, so I think we'll look at a motion in the minute. I think to Judge Seligman's point, I feel like the commission has two responsibilities. One is, seriously consider the extraordinary circumstances that programs are in and do that on an individual basis. I will say that I also think we have to be mindful of, the reports that go to the legislature and the information that they get that would show significant spending. And so I'll just say personally where I land is in considering future carryover requests, I would actually appreciate programs providing us both with information about how they are going to be able to spend the carryover amount, but also their plans for spending the subsequent year funding, which in fact may be larger, because I think that provides us with the information we need to show we're being diligent and paying attention to the sort of public nature of those funds that the legislature gives us. So that's how I would sort of frame it, that we have to consider it individually, but also understand how they're going to be able to spend both carry forward and ongoing funding. So, and Judge Seligman gave a thumbs up for that approach. Do other people have thoughts about that? I see some head shaking. So we can maybe look at the motion and, oh, Angie, please go ahead. I didn't see your hand.
Did you want that in the authorizing motion?
I thought we might just put that in the authorizing motion at the end of that, just that we would ask staff to get information from programs as part of their carry forward request about the plans to spend the carry forward, as well as their plans to spend the next year.
Am I also right that part of the rules committee is looking at clarifying a lot of things about grants and carryovers, and that could be covered by them in that setting as opposed to putting that in our motion?
Yeah, I think I don't know the timing of it, and my experience is the timing of that will require like another year from now, because by the time it gets done, and so I guess I just think for this next year, it would be helpful to us to have that information in advance and have grantees thinking about that. So I'm not trying to make a permanent rule, just saying I think it's helpful for us to be able to look at the whole picture for programs. Jim.
Yeah, wouldn't we want to do that for EAF carryovers too? Because the motion is just for IOLTA carryovers.
We could do that for both. So we can make a separate motion to get information about each of those. I think that probably makes sense.
That's better.
Makes it clearer, I think.
If I could just make one quick comment related to that, Catherine. Sorry, for some reason I can't find the raised hand feature for myself. So, but this year we did actually, staff added a question to the carryover form asking organizations to explain how they're going to spend their carryover in addition to their 2023 award. So we did attempt, I guess, to reach that that concern, because I know that it has been expressed by the committee last year as well. I don't know if it's because it was a new question, or perhaps we need to revisit the wording of it. I know some grantees did more than others in terms of explaining that. So, I mean, happy to reiterate that and to continue asking for that information, but I just did want to note that we have incorporated a question like that into the form. I think it may be a matter of needing to draw grantees' attention to it more in terms of the substance of what we need from them, because some of our follow-up, a lot of our follow-up did kind of center on that question in particular, and needing more details.
Yeah, I feel like it was hard to get those details. I mean, we have sort of two examples here, or a couple of examples where sometimes you got it and sometimes you didn't get it, but I would appreciate you asking. And I guess, I mean, you can tell us if you don't need us to put that in a motion, or if a motion's helpful, kind of to Angie's point, I think of, you know, if it's going to happen already, then maybe we don't need a motion and we'll just get the information next year. So maybe let us know what's, from a staff perspective, what's helpful.
Yeah,
I have a question, and I apologize, I've had to be distracted by some other matters. So maybe this point has been made. Is there a positive here in that we all know the phenomenon, agencies feel they have to spend the money, otherwise they'll lose it? And is there, in a sense, a positive here that people aren't doing that and they're trying to use it wisely? I don't know if anyone's raised that question. I'm sure we're all familiar with the we got to spend it, otherwise we'll lose it phenomenon.
Yeah, I mean, I think I think we heard like what, like really sincere efforts. People are trying to use the money in a smart way. I think all I was reflecting on is, I think part of our obligation is being able to show to external stakeholders, such as the legislature that provides significant equal access fund, that we also considered the program's ability to spend the future funding in addition to the, you know, so that was the context that
Right.
I.
And not wasting it just because otherwise they lose it. Yeah.
I'm sure no one wants people to waste money, that's for sure.
No, I know, but we've all heard that, probably witnessed it. I certainly did when I worked in government, not with the court, but other places.
Oh, Juan, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, regarding the motion, I don't think it's like necessary because we have it in, but I actually think it would be helpful because that would help the staff when we provide technical assistance, because with some of these, the staff did go, there was back and forth, and it was still a slim level of information that was provided to you all. So I don't think that was on the staff's end for us not trying, but I think maybe a motion, then we can quote the motion and say, and then provide a little bit context, and that might get us like more information, the information that you're looking for.
Okay, sounds great. And I think Jim's suggestion was that we would do it as a separate motion. So that would be both for equal access and for IOLTA. So let's, unless there's another comment from a member of the commission, let's just take up the existing motion, which is, ooh, it went away on my screen. There it is.
Sorry.
It's okay.
In case I needed to type into it, I exited the full screen.
Perfect. Thank you. So the motion that we're going to consider, and then we'll consider the last item we talked about. It's resolved that now thank you. Somehow your cursor was on it. The Eligibility and Budget Review Committee recommends approval of all 2022 IOLTA carry over request in excess of 25% of the grant award as reflected in Attachment B to the Legal Services Trust. Attachment B to the Legal Services Trust Fund, along with the requirement that funds not spent by June 30th, 2023 be returned to the State Bar. Is there any question or discussion about that motion? And if so, if not, is there a motion to approve? Approve?
I'll move.
Thank you, Jim. Is there a second?
A second.
Thank you, Louise. Any other discussion? Seeing any, do you want to do the roll call, Erica?
Sure. Aklagi, Fightmaster,
Yes.
King,
Yes.
Klein,
Yes.
Meeker,
Yes.
Vargas,
Yes.
Blakemore.
Yes.
Motion passes.
And before we just go into the next motion, I just want to thank Erica for her very thorough memos about this. I thought they were just very helpful and understandable and short enough that it wasn't a labor to review them. So I really appreciate that. All right, so for the fourth motion, does staff have a suggestion for us? Or should we? I think it's for carryover requests that exceed 25%. The commission asks staff, or the committee asks that staff, the committee, that we ask programs to provide us information about their plans for spending the carryover funds and their plans for spending the subsequent year's grants, something along those lines. And this has to go to the commission too, is that right? That's why I said.
No, this doesn't have to go. This
Okay.
you asking more information doesn't.
Okay. Okay, so anyone have wordsmithing for the motion? Edits are welcome.
Yeah.
Erica, I don't know if it's recommend. I think you'll just do it, right? You're not
Right.
recommending to anybody.
Yeah, I thought the recommends was because I thought somebody else had to approve it, so. Maybe it's budget committee
Requires.
request, sure, requires. Sure, it's okay with me. Any other suggestions for this? Okay, seems like there are not other suggestions, in which case, let's-
Go
ahead, Angie. Go ahead, you go.
Is that like, should we have a time period, like beginning with fiscal year something, or it's kind of vague as to when we're requesting it?
Yeah. Well, we can just make it for, I mean, we could do it for the next year and see if there's a rule that was kind of
For future requests.
Yeah, I think it's okay for future requests, for future.
Or beginning of the 2023
Mhm.
grant year.
Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you.
I think Louise has her hand raised as well.
I did see that. Thank you.
I
Louise.
was just gonna suggest that, that they, let me see, put the word specific in there somewhere, because I think we're getting very general kind of explain, there's specific plans and the carryover.
Okay, there's specific plans,
Yeah, so we have some kind of
Or
outline.
detailed information.
Right.
Okay. Other suggestions? She had a detailed information regarding their plans, so.
Are there other funding that this would apply to besides the IOLTA and the EAF? Should we put that in there?
I think that, as Dwan was saying, that we can do this, like staff can seek this information even without a motion, but as far as this committee's concern, is the universe of concern for this committee is IOLTA EAF. So.
Okay.
But we have a uniform approach regarding carryovers or budget revisions for any of our grants, so.
And I'll just add with our other grants, it is a little less flexible, I would say, with discretionary grants. Jim's the chair of the HP grant, so it's not as flexible as IOLTA and EF. They don't grant as often.
Okay. Any other good comments or questions? All right. Is there a motion to approve this resolution?
I'll move. So move.
Thank you, Angie. Louise, was that a second?
Yeah, second.
Thank you so much. Any other discussion or questions? Okay. Erica, could you do the roll call, please?
Sure. Cloggy? Fightmaster?
Yes.
King?
Yes.
Klein?
Yes.
Meeker?
Yes.
Vargas?
Yes.
And Blakemore?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Thanks everyone for a really terrific and thoughtful discussion about all of these. I'm a really terrific committee, so thank you. Do we need like a 5-minute break or something? Is anybody feeling the need for like 5 minutes? Okay, let's do a 5-minute stretch break and we'll come back. I think the rest of the agenda will be pretty straightforward. Thank you. Go back and Erica, did you see that, hear that?
Yes, we need to retake the vote.
I think Jim just wants to abstain from voting.
Okay.
On the law
Yeah, you don't need
center.
to retake. You just note it, Erica.
We just need to note it, I think.
Yeah, and it just needs to be reflected in the action summary when you guys approve.
Yeah. So that's fine.
Thank you. I've noted it.
Thanks so much. I think we're almost all back. Yep, we're all here, I think.
Great.
Perfect. I think that takes us back to item number 4. which is the administrative updates and several other items. So if you want to go ahead with that, Erica or Dwan, that would be terrific.
Sure. Sorry, just 1 second. Okay. So yeah, we had a few administrative updates. The first one being an update on our prospective applicants for 2024 funding. So we're in the process of preparing for the application release for 2024 IOLTA and EAF. That application will go out on April 3rd. So we've been receiving a lot of inquiries from organizations that are either completely new to the process or may have applied in the past but aren't current grantees. And so we decided to host a webinar for prospective applicants last week. We also opened it up to existing grantees who might have new staff or individuals who are new to the application itself and wanted a refresher or some background information. So we had 33 individuals attend. Of our attendee pool, I was able to pull out of the attendee list that we had 11 new organizations on the call. And then we had 2 additional who didn't make it, but were registered. And so they'll get a copy of the recording of the webinar as well. For the new organizations that are interested in applying, obviously we don't know yet exactly how many will submit an application, but you know, if even half of these organizations apply, that'll be 6 new applicants. So, so we'll see, but we're optimistic that we'll have a pool of new applications this year. And then anecdotally, in terms of the organizations that are interested in terms of their services, I would say at least half or about half of them do some sort of immigration services. And then there's also some organizations that do disability rights, workers' rights, domestic violence, a couple elder law focused organizations. So some variety in there, but definitely I would say the biggest interest has come from organizations providing immigration services. So yeah, any questions about the webinar or about the prospective applicants?
I think it's great that you did that. Really, really good and nice to see good attendance.
Thanks. Great. Then I think the other administrative update is really just to give the committee a preview of our impact litigation and advocacy work reports. We refer to these as ILAW reports, and wanted to give a brief overview about them because the committee's next meeting in April is going to be primarily focused on these reports and approving them or having organizations deduct from their qualified expenditures. So these ILAW reports, they have a dual purpose. They're both evaluative in the sense that we are looking back at 2022 activities these organizations engaged in and work that they performed on behalf of groups or classes of individuals. So we're looking at sort of the more systemic focused work, broad scale change that these organizations are trying to engage in versus say individual services. So it's an ability for the organizations to share their accomplishments and their progress on these initiatives, but it also ties into their eligibility for grants in the subsequent year. So we're also reviewing these reports to make sure that they are qualifying work. So we're looking for, civil legal services for the benefit of indigent persons in the case of qualified legal services projects. And the way that we do that when it's not, based on income for individual services is to look at, the forum where these organizations are advocating, the target group or the target population that would be benefited or impacted by the advocacy, whether it's more than 50% or whether those individuals are disproportionately impacted if they're indigent, things of that nature. So it's primarily making a determination that it is legal services, as well as that it's, primarily on behalf of indigent persons. When the committee has found that an activity is not qualifying, an organization needs to deduct that on their application. So it comes out of their qualified expenditures and, can impact things like their primary purpose or their allocation award. So the way it's currently set up is that these activities are reported out where the organization reports up to 10 advocacy activities. So let's say they're advocating with the legislature to pass a bill, or they've drafted a new bill that they want passed. That would go under advocacy activities, and then up to 15 impact litigation cases. Obviously, if organizations don't engage in that many activities, they just report whatever they've done. If they do more than these 25 activities, then we ask them to summarize the remainder of the work that they did that would fall under this umbrella of impact litigation and advocacy work. We ask them to report based on the number of hours that they're engaging in these activities. So we ask them to report sort of the biggest activities, are the ones that had the most time devoted to them during the year, and work their way down from there. As I said, the committee reviews activities that where the qualifying nature of the work might be in question. So examples from prior years were when organizations were doing census outreach, encouraging people, going from door to door canvassing, encouraging people to participate in the census, for example. That was an instance where the committee didn't think that it met the requirements of legal services. Another was, I believe, voting rights work, again, going out and working in the community on voting rights issues. In that instance, the committee didn't necessarily feel that there was enough of a nexus to indigent persons in order for it to be a qualifying activity. So it varies from year to year. I can't say exactly what, activities might come up, and staff has to review basically thousands of these activities. We have 100 grantees, and if they, report even 10 activities, that's 1,000 right there. So I will say, historically, almost all of these are qualifying work, but every year there are a handful that the committee will need to take a closer look at and make that call. So that'll be our process, that staff will do the first pass, and then anything that's concerning or questionable would be brought to the committee at its next meeting in April. And then one thing I wanted to highlight is that there are some proposed rule changes that would both impact our analysis of these activities and the number of reports. So there's a pending rule change to reduce the number of reports that grantees would have to file. This would be to reduce the burden on everybody, grantees, staff, and the commission. And that rule was proposed because after an analysis of some of the reports that were filed, it was that, the hours that were being spent on some of these activities would really be considered de minimis, and whether it was worthwhile to be spending more time writing the report than you spent on the activity in the year. I think they were trying to find a balance there. And so in perhaps in future years, we might have a smaller number of reports to review together. And then there is a proposed rule change for the definition of legal services, which I think would provide more guidance to staff and the commission about, for these broader impact activities, what is a legal service. And so that rule change would change the definition to focus on the use of legal knowledge and skills to create, advance, protect, or enforce the legal rights of indigent clients or communities. And the memo that went along with that to change the definition had a bunch of examples, particularly in things like grassroots organizing or mobilization or advocacy activities that would fall on one side or the other in terms of qualifying or not. So that rule change hasn't happened yet, but staff does anticipate that if it is approved ultimately, that it'll heavily impact the way that we're looking at these activities and give clearer guidance that I think we currently lack in terms of determining what's qualifying and what's not for these wide scale projects. So I think I saw Jim, you had your hand up. maybe not. Okay.
He's working on it.
Oh, okay.
Okay, sorry. I was wondering the primary purpose of these reports, is this to show the legislature the bang for the buck they're getting, or is it something else?
The purpose of the reports, yeah, it's part of just overall looking at like telling the full story of the work that the organizations are engaging in a way that's not captured in some of our other evaluations. Like we have our case summary report, which all the QLSPs need to fill out, which provides demographic data. It tells you how many clients they saw. It tells you what level of service they provided. So we can get a lot more granular data related to individual client services. But when the organizations are doing these more wide scale activities or advocating on behalf of an entire community or entire group of clients, it's harder to capture in those reports. So it's to get a more holistic view of the services that are being provided. But it is also, like I said, it ties into eligibility, because if for any reason the work is not qualifying, then an organization does need to deduct that on their IOLTA EAF application in order for us to get an accurate calculation of their qualified expenditures.
Okay.
Yes, Catherine.
So thank you. My recollection is with the new proposed rule that in prior years we had used it as sort of informal guidance to help us think about it, because it's actually a much clearer rule in my view than our guidance. So are we going to be able to use it in the same way for these reviews?
I think so. Yeah, I think that it's not controlling. It would just be guidance at this point. So if you did want to reference the recommendation, because it's reflective of the commission's thinking on these topics, because it has been recommended by the commission. So so the fact that it hasn't been finalized, it's not controlling, but as you asked, it could be guidance for the committee to turn to when making those decisions.
Oh, perfect. So maybe you, when you send the materials out for the review, maybe you could just send it and notice it's guidance, but not controlling. And I just think it helps people think broadly about what is a legal service in ways that the current rule doesn't provide that type of guidance.
Sure.
Thank you.
Who's on that committee?
On the rules committee?
Yeah.
Or the rules, I was on the subcommittee that worked on that specific rule, and I don't know if I remember everybody that was on it, but anyway, and then we got extensive fee. I mean, the value of the rule to me is the staff did an amazing job, because they did a series of focus groups with legal services providers about what are people currently doing, where what is a legal service, what are the guardrails to make sure it really is a legal service. And so the rule that's being proposed had extensive feedback from the legal services organizations. It has some really clear examples, and I think has agreement in the legal aid community that it is a much improved rule, which is why I think it's helpful guidance, because it's been so thoroughly vetted before it becomes kind of the formal actual rule.
Okay, I was just wondering, because in the early days on the reboot committee, I was one of the early advocates to say we needed to collect household size data, because when you say you've represented 1,500 unlawful detainer clients, you really impacted all of their households. The same thing with income maintenance. And I was just wondering if this rule addresses things like that. We're trying to get more accurate data on the actual impact.
This rule is not about that. It's about what is a legal service, and the current rule could really be read to say it's a service provided by an attorney, which is not how legal aid organizations operate. There's a bigger breadth of who provides services, and it reflects kind of the staff approaches to thinking about that over the last year, like using social workers to provide services when it's connected to a legal aid case and other things. So that's what that rule's about. It's not about the data collection.
Okay, thanks.
but I will say, Jim, that we do collect household data in our main and economic benefits report. So when, as you're saying, you know, when an organization reports, for example, that they avoided an eviction, not only would they note that they had that outcome for the client, but we do ask like the number of persons in the household for that outcome. So we do have a way of capturing that to some extent.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for all the good.
Sure. So that's it for ILAW. If there are no other questions or comments, I will move on to our grantee related updates. I believe Tim has raised his hand.
Who is there? Oh, Tim, perfect.
Hi, I just wanted to let you guys know that we're still on and we're going to stay on until we get to 6.1, which addresses one of our issues. But I didn't want you to think we had left. Both myself and my administrator are going to be available for any questions on that.
Okay, thank you so much.
Okay.
We're now on 5, so let's do 5.1, Erica.
Sure. So some quick grantee related updates. The first one being that we've scheduled a few follow-up visits after our 2022 monitoring visits concluded. So we currently have 2 organizations identified for follow-up this year. One of them is California Rural Legal Assistance, and their follow-up visit will be at the end of September. They had a visit sort of later in 2022, so we wanted to give them some time after the visit before checking in with them again to see what changes they've made. So just to let you know what prompted this follow-up was that CRLA, as part of the monitoring visit, the fiscal findings included a note that, you know, the organization's audit the past several years has had notes that certain accounts, including restricted net assets, contribution revenue, grant revenue, and payroll expenses were not reconciled, nor were they adjusting to the correct balance until after the audit commenced. They've also had some challenges with their expense allocations. So we're noticing in their reporting to the state bar that they're overspending in certain counties and underspending in others. And so because of sort of the repeated nature of some of these fiscal findings, as well as the concern about, you know, ensuring that funds are being spent in the county where they're awarded, staff felt that it warranted a follow-up visit, because some of the explanation that we've received was that, you know, the organization has experienced a lot of turnover on their fiscal staff, and that's kind of what's causing some of these deficiencies or gaps. But again, given that, especially given those audit findings regarding the failure to reconcile or correct their balances, that's just been a repeated finding in their audit for, I think, 4 or 5 years. So staff wants to ensure that those, you know, changes are being made, corrections are being made, and that the organization is strengthening its fiscal oversight. So we've scheduled a follow-up with them. I believe Heidi conducted that visit. So Heidi, if you had anything you wanted to add about CRLA, but I think Stephanie was on the call earlier and alluded to some of those challenges that they had when she gave her public comment.
That's true.
And then the second one is the Center for Human Rights and Constitutional Law. We're still working on scheduling that follow-up visit, but what prompted a follow-up with this organization is that they, we found that they hadn't been deducting certain expenditures on the IOLTA EAF application that they should have. So they have, for example, a property that they own and manage that's unrelated to the delivery of legal support services because they're a support center. And so they had been deducting their administrative costs, but they hadn't been deducting their direct costs like property management and property taxes, repair expenses, things like that. So, so we've identified that as something that they'll have to work on for the next application cycle, as well as the fact that they didn't have segregation of duties in terms of their executive assistant having physical control of their checks, as well as being responsible for record keeping regarding those checks. And the fact that they've had a lot of turnover at that position. And so making sure that there's consistency there and that they're following their own protocols was sort of the main reason for scheduling follow-up with them. So committee members are always invited to, either planned monitoring visits or any follow-up visits that we conduct. So if anybody's interested in either of these organizations, you can let me know. We have some time until their visits come up. But that's sort of the update on follow-up for monitoring visits currently. Yes, Dwan.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that prior to a few years ago, we didn't regularly bring up monitoring visits to the eligibility committee and then the more serious findings to the commission. So we're making more of a concerted effort to bring it to your attention. The other piece is, because we've received so much funding in the last few years, we've built out, I think you've heard me say this at the commission level, our infrastructure and specifically our fiscal team. It used to be just one senior financial analyst, and now we have a team of 4. We just hired another program analyst, fiscal analyst to help us. And so that team is really built out. They're really excellent. Heidi, Michael, and you'll meet the other 2 at one point or another. And so it's an opportunity for us to kind of pinpoint, areas that programs can work on and give them technical assistance. So you'll be hearing more reports like this.
Great.
Great. Then I think the next update was, you all might recall at the last committee meeting when making recommendations on budget approvals regarding Western Center on Law and Poverty, there had been a discussion about the organization submitting their budget late, and then it was substantially incomplete, and that we've had some challenges with other grant materials. Similarly, they're coming in late or needing revision. And so their budget approval was contingent on having a follow-up call with both the committee and State Bar staff. And so Catherine and myself spoke with representatives from the Western Center on Law and Poverty a few weeks ago. We spoke with their executive director, their director of finance, and I believe their grants director. Excuse me. And it was a productive discussion. The organization has reiterated its commitment to, meeting its requirements under the grant. And is sorry.
It's okay. You want me to fill in for a minute?
If you wouldn't mind, yes.
It was, I think the committee adopted a practice of just trying to identify for programs areas in which we had concerns about repeated late submissions, repeated late audits, in part because of the impact it has on staff and holding up their ability to get the information to the commission, because you can't run the formula unless you have everybody's financial statements in, unless people have completed their audits, etc. Anyway, I found it to be really helpful to join a call. I would encourage any of you, if there's the opportunity and you have time, to join a similar call. I felt Western Center on Law and Poverty was extraordinarily open to the feedback. I really liked Erica's approach of offering the opportunity in these webinars for current staff to attend, because in Western Center's case, there was some new grant staff that actually just didn't have the information. And I think there was just some confusion about the way that the trust fund had to operate in specific parameters. So it was a really helpful conversation, and I think they found it helpful. So very productive.
Thank you, Catherine. If there's no questions about what Western Center, I'll move on to our expense report updates, which center on public counsel. So it recently came to the State Bar's attention from public counsel themselves that they had been perhaps reporting their expenditures incorrectly on a number of their grants, including IOLTA and EAF. And so basically what was communicated to us was that they were not reporting their actual expenditures on a quarterly basis. The way they had been reporting was basically taking a proportion of their budget every quarter and reporting that out. So, you know, if the whole year is 100%, then each quarter they were reporting 25% spend down on each line item, but it was not necessarily tied to their actual expenditures. So I don't have much more of an update at the moment regarding that, other than that staff is working to understand sort of where that practice came from, because our understanding at our most recent monitoring was that it was tied to their timesheets, and so there is a discrepancy there. But we are working on providing technical assistance and working through their reports to understand how it impacts them in terms of whether they actually did spend down the grant appropriately, or if there is any unspent funds, and things like that. So I'll likely have another update at a future meeting, but just did want to note that for this organization, we are going to have to take a closer look at their expense reports and possibly make some updates. And then my last update is just about closeout for a former grantee. We had family legal assistance at Chalk Children's. The last year that they received funding was 2021, so they didn't receive any funding last year. The organization was a very small organization, and the staff that had been there have since departed, and so State Bar staff have been working with individuals who are not as familiar with the grant requirements, as well as their reporting. And so we've only just recently been able to get a final expense report from 2021, but it does indicate that there was complete spend down of the grant. We just need to follow up with them regarding their by county spending, because they did operate in more than one county. And so need to make sure that it was spent in the appropriate counties in which the funds were awarded. But other than that, we have obtained what we need to obtain from the grantee, I think, in order to finalize closing out their record and ensuring that they spent the award from their last year of funding, which was 2021. Yes, Jim.
Yeah, I'm on the rules committee for law school clinical programs. And they've got a unique problem in that they are part of a larger organization whose primary mission is not delivering legal services to the poor. And most of our rules and regulations are written for like a standalone 503c organization whose primary mission is to give legal services to the poor. So I was wondering, Chalk was one of the few grantees that we had that was similar to the law school clinics, in that they were part of a larger organization whose primary mission was not delivering legal services to the poor. So I had heard at one point part of the problem was the auditing issue, separate independent audits. But now, from what I understand, you said it was a problem of personnel leaving.
Well, the thing that precipitated them no longer, being an eligible grantee was that for the 2022 application period, they submitted an application, but they did not submit a reviewed financial statement. And when staff followed up with them, it became apparent that they were not going to be able to do that, even with an extension. My understanding at the time was that there was, somebody in the role of an executive director, and then maybe one staff attorney, and the person who had been the executive director had to leave on short notice due to some, personal or family matter, and was not really available. And then the staff attorney who remained was not familiar with a lot of the management aspects of the organization. She was only providing program services. And so the organization no longer had anybody who could, provide that information to us. And so they essentially said, well, we're not going to be able to get you that audit, and then decided not to proceed with their application. But so I think it was a combination of missing key pieces of the application, as well as not having the staff support there to make up for when there were some shortcomings. So
Okay, and do we have any other grantees that are in a similar situation, that they're part of larger organizations that whose primary purpose is not delivering legal services?
I don't think so. I mean, I think in the case of Chalk, if I'm remembering correctly, they had to become their own entity because of what you just stated, that, you know, they had started as a clinic that had been kind of under the auspices of the hospital, but then they had to become their own organization in order to establish their primary purpose. So I think you're correct that law school clinics are the only ones that kind of are in that sort of less traditional setting where they are allowed to be part of a larger institution that doesn't have that same primary purpose.
Okay, because that's some of the feedback we're getting from law school clinics who are not part of who don't get funding from us is the issue of separate independent audits and the difficulty of getting those, especially very small clinics.
I think Juan had a comment too, maybe.
Yeah, so Erica worked with this program to kind of close out, and it's been over a year, and Erica followed up many times. We've had a similar situation with another very small program that decided not to have funding, and then one of our staff had to follow up many months. So I think the commission maybe this needs to go with the rules committee, kind of think about at a point where if they're not responsive, then if they're not filling out their expenditures report or giving us our report, then there needs to be some mechanism or some authority that's given to staff to perhaps invoice them or whatever it is that you want us to do. Because in this instance, Erica, you know, she checked in with me and I said, okay, let's just try to be flexible, work with them. But it was a lot of time expended from the staff to get them to get their expenditures. And I think in this instance, we did feel more comfortable because they had reported at one instance that it was spent down, but somebody needed to go in there and actually fill out the report, and they didn't know how to. So we were more or less confident that they did expend it, but I could foresee a situation where we don't know that. And then what does the commission want to do at that juncture, and how we want to handle that situation? You know, with programs that are reapplying for funding, they know their grant, like we'll hold a check or we'll elevate to you. So we don't have that type of situation, but it's the programs that like either are found ineligible or don't decide to reapply for funding. It's not in every instance, but it does seem it's more of a pattern when that happens.
Oh, Catherine, I think you're muted.
You are so right. I was seeing if there's any other questions about these items, and if not, I think we're ready to go on to 6.1, which is the item that Tim from Greater Bakersfield Legal Aid was interested in. So if we can go there, that would be terrific.
Sure. So just some brief background on this item. Related to 2020 and 2021 IOLTA EAF budget deviations that weren't reported. We had a number of grantees that we conducted monitoring visits with last year that we came to learn during the course of the monitoring visit that these organizations had deviated from their prior year's budgets without seeking approval, like what we just did with the item before. They didn't go through that process with these budget deviations. And so there were 3 organizations: Child Care Law Center, Greater Bakersfield Legal Assistance, and Inland Empire Latino Lawyers Association. And this all related because of the period that we were looking at during 2022 monitoring visits. We were looking at the prior year's grants. And 2020 is included because a number of organizations had carryover from 2020 into 2021. So as you can see, you know, with Child Care Law Center and Greater Bakersfield, that like all of their grants had some sort of budget deviation that went unreported, or perhaps, you know, in some instances they did request a budget revision previously, but then they deviated further and didn't get a second approval the next time that they made those revisions. So, you know, we noted in the memo that in some cases, it seemed that these organizations didn't recognize the need to request a revision, not having a full grasp of what staff is looking at when we're measuring what the percentage change is for the deviation. In other instances, the organization, made an attempt to submit a request, but it wasn't through the proper forms. So in Child Care Law Center's example, they did submit an attachment as part of an expense report saying, oh, we need these deviations, but it didn't come to staff's attention immediately because it wasn't through our normal budget revision process. So the recommendation initially from staff was that the organizations return the funds that they had misspent. But upon reflection, after reading through the responses from these organizations to their monitoring visit findings, as well as considering sort of the approach to budget revisions in recent years, staff is recommending that these budget deviations be approved, but that the organizations receive a formal warning that, if this were to recur and they don't follow the proper procedure, that they would be considered in default under those circumstances and be required to return funding. But staff felt that a couple of things, like the one I mentioned, which is organizations don't always understand how the percentages are calculated, so they don't know what triggers a formal revision, because they are allowed to deviate up to 10% without any intervention or approval. And then the other was that, organizations are supposed to request a budget revision within 5 business days of any deviation, any material deviation. But that hasn't been a provision that's been enforced as carefully in recent years. And so most organizations just do their budget revisions at the end of the year. And so staff felt that maybe those circumstances combined may have not sent a message about how imperative it is to make these requests timely and to get that formal approval from either staff or the commission, depending on the percentage deviation. So so like I said, we're recommending approval of these deviations and with the understanding that the organization should also be aware in the future that they will need to make a formal request and get it approved. Yes.
So I'll ask my question at the end. It seems like Jim has a question. So go ahead, Jim.
It's my understanding these 3 were found during routine monitoring visits that are done on a 3-year period. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay, and how many monitoring visits did you do in 2022?
I think probably about 32 to 35.
We had a high year. It was, I want to say 37, 39, but there were some like add-ons because of from follow-ups. But we typically do a third a year, so it should work out like 33, but depending on the year, sometimes it's 35, sometimes it's 39.
And do you think that these particular 3, I mean, is this an exceptional number for 32 site visits, or is this normal, or?
That I can't say. I haven't asked the fiscal staff for sort of an accounting of, how often they're encountering that with their other visits. Yeah.
Okay, and do you think perhaps that this is due to the extraordinary circumstances we've had the last couple of years, larger carryovers and so on?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's entirely possible that, organizations were experiencing different demands and had a need to revise their budgets. It's not really questioning whether there was a reason to revise. It was just whether they had actually gotten formal approval for it or not. So.
Okay, thanks.
Are there other questions? And I guess also, did Tim have a comment you wanted to make?
Yeah, it looks like both Tim from Greater Bakersfield and then Kim Krukel from Child Care Law Center would like to.
So, Judge Seligman, do you want to ask your question? And then
I think it's implicit in what Erica said, but I take it that the actual revisions, when you looked at them, were all within acceptable parameters. That is, they were all legitimate activities.
Yeah, that's my understanding when the fiscal team looked at it. Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Okay, let's hear from Tim, and then Kim. I guess you said the other person was.
Yes.
Okay, Tim, go ahead.
Good afternoon. I'll keep this brief. I just wanted to add a little bit of color to the summary that we gave to Heidi in response to the monitoring visit report. We're a longstanding grantee of the State Bar, decades long. My grant administrator's been here for 30 years. I started in 2012. So we're not strangers to the need for budget revisions. And so we wanted to give an explanation as to how this could have occurred with a seasoned group like ours. In the past, I think as I made an allusion to before, we've had carryovers, but 10% and small carryovers that were quite easy to budget accurately when we did the budget revision that was required to do the carryover. So over the years, there's been one process where we do a budget revision, carryover request, and then we're going to hit that 99 times out of 100. And the issue with these larger carryovers is that they're a little bit more unwieldy, which is nobody's problem but our own. But as we do the budget revision, which we did in all three of these instances on the initial carryover request, what we didn't do is have a secondary process where if the carryover dollars moved around, which everything was moving around quite a bit, that we have to do a subsequent budget revision. So what we've done is we want to let you know that it's not a systemic thing with us, and that we've even so have put some precautions in place that we think will allow us to not have this happen again. And starting with 2022, of course, as we did our budget revision for the carryover. We've got a compliance checklist that we've put in place now that is going to be a double check for these kinds of things so that they don't fall through the crack. And additionally, the entire fiscal staff is going to go through a retraining, including myself and my grant administrator, provided by MIE. And so anyway, I just thought that some color on how this occurred and how it slipped through our normal procedures that have been longstanding for decades, how it manifests itself. And yes, it did have to do with the fact that through COVID, these carryovers have been extraordinarily large, even for us. And I'd be open to any questions about what I have tried to explain here.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that. Does anyone have a question of Tim? Okay, I think there's no questions, and so let's move on to Kim. Welcome, Kim. Did you have you're on mute, and if there
How's
you go.
this?
Excellent.
Yes. Okay, great. Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. I've met many of you before, but just to reintroduce myself, I'm Tim Kruckle, the Executive Director of the Child Care Law Center. I'm just going to take a brief minute to thank all of you and the staff at the State Bar for reversing their recommendation. Their original recommendation was that we return the funds that were spent out of it as a deviation. So we're very grateful for that reassessment of the situation. And also to all of you for the time and effort that you put into this. I want to assure you how seriously we took this. And by way of proof, 3 or 4 or 5 even of my board members are also here on the call today. And we're all here just in case you have any questions or want to know, how we proceed, how we plan to proceed. And our situation is a little different than Tim's. We don't have quite that many years of grants experience, but at the request or at the insistence of our board members after the visit, we are instituting some much more close reviews of our policies and procedures on a twice a year basis, just to make sure we're not losing sight of any of the myriad rules and regulations that we follow, as well as working more closely with our new finance director and bookkeeper to review the grant expenditures that we have every month. The good news in all of this for the Child Care Law Center is some of you might remember that we are historically a very small organization, small but mighty, the only organization in the whole United States devoted exclusively to child care law. And it's our primary purpose to serve the legal aid attorneys of this state and to create the systemic change that will make childcare available for every low-income family that needs it, and make the payment rates more livable for those childcare providers that are providing that service. So we take our mission very seriously, and I just want to say that this recommendation by the staff is important to us, and we'll be doing everything we can. And I'll stop talking now, but just in case you have any questions, our treasurer is here, and our vice president, vice chair, and several other board members are here today. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Kim. We appreciate all of you making time to come in for the explanation. Does anyone have any questions or comments? So I guess the only question / comment I have is, should the staff consider doing, like, making available sort of a once-a-year webinar about sort of key issues and key findings that have come up during the grant reviews, particularly in the fiscal arena, as a way of some ongoing technical assistance to programs. I think what we're all observing is, there's been a lot of turnover because of COVID, because executive directors and others have retired, those kinds of things. And I just think it might be a good practice to be able to share kind of the lessons learned and the expectations. And my only other comment is wondering if, as we're thinking about the rules, like, having run a large program for a long time, I don't think I knew until today that there was a 5-day requirement to make a budget request. And we actually made budget requests at least quarterly, if not more frequently. So it just raised for me is that a reasonable standard? Is that what the bar actually wants? And whether that item in particular should be something that we kind of flag for a subsequent rules revision as that's being looked at. But so those are my 2 comments.
Catherine, I think Sylvia from Inland Empire also would like to make a comment.
All right, I'm sorry, I did not mean to speak before, Sylvia. I didn't realize she was still there. So welcome back, Sylvia.
Thank you, commissioners, for this opportunity to honestly just say that we have taken this very seriously, and we are sorry that this happened. But we were really confused. There was just such a confusion with the process and with the calculating process. But we have spoken with Heidi, and she's worked with us on understanding the process from now on the calculating. And I just want to thank you all for your consideration and for helping us with not, making us pay this money back, in the sense that we're a small organization, and it would just be a horrible financial burden on us. But please just know that we have taken this seriously, and we are in contact with Heidi, and we've gone over the calculating process, and we understand it way better than we did before. And so thank you again.
Thank you, Sylvia. All right, we have a comment from Jim and then from Dwan. You have to unmute again.
Sorry, I'm on one of the committees that's looking at how to redefine carryover, and the problem with multi-year grants, and the fact that they only review it at the end of the year. So that 5-day notification came as a surprise to me, and I think it's in the process of being changed.
Terrific. Thanks for the update, Dwan.
I was just going to say the same thing. There's a committee working on this. And then in terms of like how to do the calculation, one of the recommendations that's going to come out of that, Heidi and Michael are developing a form that programs can take and then just plug it in, and then it'll auto calculate for them the 10%, 25%. It'll make it really easy and clear, because right now what happens was, sometimes programs are confused and they go to the fiscal team to do the calculation. We want transparency, and we want programs to be a little bit more self-sufficient and be able to do that calculation by themselves. So that will help. And then Catherine, I'll take your suggestion and have the fiscal staff try to roll out maybe a training or something later this year around fiscal stuff, just because there's been a lot of fiscal, even you have seen in this meeting, a lot of the issues that are raised are fiscally related.
Yeah, and I think you have a team that now the fiscal team really understands what the rules are. And it seems like, quite a sort of different experience than I think in the past there was a contractor who actually did the fiscal reviews and I can tell you those fiscal reviews honestly were like maybe 4 hours for the largest organization in the state. So I think it's a different process now, and people are able to provide technical assistance and guidance, and it would be great. I appreciate you having that information available to all the grantees.
No, thank you. And we've hired some really excellent staff. Heidi came from a former grantee. We've hired some of our other staff have CPA, like auditing experience. And this is not to say we want to find a finding. It's really just in the spirit of trying to strengthen kind of internal controls for our programs.
Yeah, that's terrific. Okay, and I also just want to thank the grantees who stayed most of the day, the afternoon with us, and for all the information you provided. It was, I always appreciate hearing directly from grantees and their experience and what they've been working through. So thanks to, I know that Tim, Kim, and Sylvia are still here, and maybe some others. I just wanted to specifically acknowledge you. So I'm not seeing any other hands raised on that. Do we need to, is there something we need to approve for this, Erica?
Yes, I have a
motion.
motion.
Okay, so there's a resolution that we recommend approval of the unreported 2020 and 2021 IOLTA EAF budget deviations from Child Care Law Center, Greater Bakersfield Legal Assistance, and Inland Empire Latino Lawyers, Inc. And it's further resolved that we recommend that the Legal Services Trust Fund Commission provide a formal warning to these three organizations that future unreported deviations will not be approved, and that the Legal Services Trust Fund will pursue any remedies available to it under the general grant provision. So are there comments or questions about the proposed resolution? Okay, I'm not seeing any. Does someone wish to make a formal motion to approve the resolution?
I'll move.
Thank you, Jim. Is there a second? Is that Luis? Thank you, Luis. Thank you. Okay, there's a motion and a second. Any other discussion on this item? Okay, not hearing any. I think we're ready for a vote.
Aklagi, Scheitmaster,
Yes.
King,
Yes.
Klein, Meeker,
Yes.
Vargas,
Yes.
Blakemore.
Yes.
I'm sorry, I didn't see if Judge Klein is
I think
still
he might have
dropped
left.
off. Okay,
Yeah,
that's
look.
fine. I just wanted to make sure I didn't. Either way, regardless, the motion passes.
All right, thank you so much. I think we are at the end of our agenda, unless there's something anyone else wants to bring. That was a yay from Angie. Okay, thank you. Thank you everyone for participating. Do we need a formal motion to adjourn?
No. We
can adjourn. Have a great weekend, everyone. Thanks for the really terrific discussions. Really a good committee meeting.
Great.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.